For centuries, the Bible has been presented as a closed collection of texts, books selected, organized, and preserved as if they had always existed exactly in that form. But that idea is more comforting than it is true. The Book of Enoch is proof of that. For a long time, it circulated among ancient Jewish communities as a respected text, quoted, studied, and taken seriously. It was not a fringe writing. It was not an obvious heresy. On the contrary, its ideas deeply influenced the religious thought of the period in which Christianity emerged. What is most unsettling is that the New Testament itself makes a direct reference to Enoch. The Epistle of Jude quotes words attributed to him. That means that, at some point, this book was considered worthy of dialogue with the texts we now call canonical. And yet, it did not remain. The Book of Enoch presents a vision of the spiritual world very different from the one that later became dominant. In it, the universe is not merely a moral stage, but a structured system, with hierarchies, laws, and transgressions that directly affect the order of reality. Enoch describes beings known as the Watchers, entities tasked with observing humanity, who, according to the text, crossed a boundary that was never meant to be crossed. They did not simply interfere in the human world. They taught. They revealed knowledge. They introduced practices that altered the course of history. Metallurgy, astronomy, writing, enchantments, warfare, cosmology. This detail is crucial. In the Book of Enoch, the problem is not merely disobedience, it is the transmission of knowledge. The Watcher's error was not loving humanity, but teaching what was never meant to be taught. The text suggests that certain forms of knowledge carry consequences that exceed humanity's capacity to bear them. This completely changes the traditional reading of the fall. Here, evil does not arise solely from moral sin, but from premature access to knowledge that reshapes the structure of the world itself. Knowledge in this context is not neutral. It transforms, it accelerates, it destabilizes. Perhaps that is why the Book of Enoch became uncomfortable. It presents a God who does not merely punish actions, but enforces boundaries. A God who establishes clear limits between what may be revealed and what must remain hidden. A God who treats knowledge as something to be regulated, not freely distributed. Over time, the Book of Enoch was gradually set aside. It did not disappear all at once. It was slowly silenced, removed from the center, labeled apocryphal, until its absence began to feel natural. But the text never truly vanished. It survived within specific traditions, most notably in Ethiopia, as an echo of a worldview too ancient, too complex, and perhaps too dangerous to remain at the heart of institutional faith. What remains is not the question of whether Enoch is true or false. The more disturbing question is something else. What kind of knowledge must a text contain to be considered excessive? And why, from the very beginning, do religion and occultism seem to agree on one silent truth? Not everything is meant to be taught to everyone. At the center of the Book of Enoch stands an unsettling figure, the Watchers. They are not described as demons in the conventional sense, nor as chaotic, lawless forces. On the contrary, the Watchers appear as appointed beings, observers, guardians, entities with a clearly defined role within the cosmic structure described by the text. The problem begins when that role is abandoned. According to Enoch, the Watchers descend to earth and cross a boundary that had been firmly established. They do not merely approach humanity, they engage with it directly. The text presents this act not as an accident, but as a conscious decision. But the most disturbing element is not the contact, it is the teaching. The Watchers begin to reveal specific forms of knowledge to humans, not moral instruction, not spiritual guidance, but practical, technical, and structural knowledge. They teach how to work metals, how to forge weapons, how to observe the movements of the heavens, how to interpret signs, how to manipulate words and formulas. In the Book of Enoch, this transmission is not neutral. Each revelation alters something in the order of the world. Metallurgy intensifies warfare. Astrology reshapes the perception of time. Enchantments interfere with the relationship between language and reality. Cosmology expands human awareness abruptly and unevenly. The text suggests that humanity was not prepared for such a leap. Here, the error is not simply the Watcher's disobedience, it is the disruption of a rhythm. Knowledge accelerates processes that were meant to unfold gradually. It expands human power without equally expanding the capacity to manage that power. The Book of Enoch introduces an idea that runs through many occult traditions. Knowledge is force, and force, when delivered without restraint, destabilizes. The Watchers are punished not merely for mingling with humanity, but for delivering knowledge that displaces humankind from its original position. The world, according to the text, falls into disorder, not because evil suddenly appears, but because balance is broken. This reading profoundly reshapes the concept of the fall. The problem is not only moral, it is structural. The knowledge transmitted alters the very architecture of reality. It creates excess, it creates hybrids, it creates distortions that did not exist before. The Nephilim emerge in this context as a consequence, not a cause. They are the visible effect of an invisible transgression, something new, unstable, and belonging fully to no existing order. For this reason, in the Book of Enoch, the divine response is not merely punishment, it is containment. The Watchers are removed, imprisoned, silenced. The flow of knowledge is interrupted. The transmission is cut. The message is clear, even if uncomfortable. There are limits to what may be revealed. Not because humanity is unworthy of knowledge, but because too much knowledge, too soon, demands a price. The Book of Enoch does not condemn knowledge itself. It condemns revelation that is out of time, out of proportion, and out of preparation. This distinction is subtle but essential. And perhaps that is exactly what makes the text so unsettling. It suggests that not every truth is liberating. Some truths destabilize. Some truths require a maturity that does not yet exist. What begins to emerge here is a disturbing vision, that evil does not enter the world solely through corruption of the heart, but through the opening of doors that were never meant to be opened. In the Book of Enoch, knowledge is presented as something to be managed, guarded, and, at certain moments, restrained. And in this, religion and occultism draw dangerously close around a silent agreement. Not everything is meant to be taught to everyone. As the Book of Enoch unfolds, it becomes clear that it is not merely an account of transgression. It is a detailed description of an invisible structure underlying the world, a cartography of the cosmos that rarely appears in traditional religious texts. Enoch describes the universe as a system organized in layers, heavens upon heavens, regions separated not by distance but by function, each part of creation obeying a specific order, sustained by laws that are not moral in nature, but structural. The text speaks of portals, boundaries, and paths along which the sun, the moon, and the stars move. Nothing happens by chance. The celestial bodies are not merely objects in the sky, but entities that obey commands. When they deviate, they are punished. When they remain within order, they uphold the balance of the world. This vision stands in sharp contrast to modern symbolic interpretations. In the Book of Enoch, heaven is not an abstract concept, it is a regulated system. Time is not simply a sequence of days, it is a mechanism. The calendar, the seasons, and natural cycles appear as parts of a precise apparatus, one that can be disrupted when certain limits are crossed. Enoch also describes spiritual hierarchies with names, functions, and responsibilities. Angels who govern winds, stars, waters, and specific regions of creation. Each force has a defined role. When that role is abandoned, the impact is not local, it spreads. The text details lists of names, not as mere identification, but as a language of power. To know a name in this context is to understand a function. It is to touch a sensitive point within the cosmic order. Another unsettling aspect is how the text treats human destiny. Humanity does not appear as the absolute center of creation, but as part of a larger system, one that can be affected both by human choices and by external interference. The Book of Enoch suggests that history does not unfold in a linear way. It responds to cycles, to ruptures, to corrections. Judgment in this framework is not merely moral, it is restorative. A forced return to order when imbalance becomes unsustainable. There are also descriptions of reserved places, zones of containment, regions where certain entities are kept apart from the normal flow of creation, not as symbolic punishment, but as a security measure, as if the universe itself required areas of isolation to preserve its stability. The text makes no effort to explain everything. It describes, it shows, it leaves gaps. And perhaps that is what is most unsettling. The Book of Enoch does not invite easy interpretation. It demands contemplation, time, silence. When reading these descriptions, it becomes clear why the text became problematic. It does not reinforce a simple faith. It presents a complex reality, governed by invisible laws and by a hierarchy that does not revolve around immediate human experience. What Enoch describes is not a world ruled solely by direct divine will, but by an established order that must be maintained. When that order is violated, the entire system reacts. Here, knowledge is not merely illumination, it is responsibility. And perhaps it is at this point that the Book of Enoch begins to touch something dangerous. It suggests that to understand the structure of the world is to assume a weight that few are capable of carrying. The text offers no comfort, it offers vision, and not every vision is meant to be sustained for long. After everything the Book of Enoch describes, the watchers, the knowledge that was transmitted, the structure of the cosmos, the boundaries that were crossed, the inevitable question is not why the text feels strange. It is why it did not remain. The Book of Enoch was not rejected all at once. It was not publicly burned or immediately condemned. What happened was more subtle than that. It was set aside, silenced, removed from the center, labeled excessive. In the early centuries, its ideas circulated. They influenced communities, shaped collective imagination, and helped form how the spiritual world was understood. But over time, something within the text began to unsettle. The problem was not only theological, it was structural. The Book of Enoch does not present a simple universe. It offers no easy answers. It does not reduce evil to a purely moral issue. Instead, it introduces the idea that imbalance in the world can arise from excess knowledge, from broken limits, and from revelation delivered out of time. That kind of vision is difficult to manage. A text like this shifts the focus away from individual behavior and toward the structure of reality itself. It suggests that invisible laws are constantly at work, and that not everything depends on conscious human choice. That makes the world more complex, less predictable, less controllable. Perhaps for this reason, over time, the Book of Enoch became inconvenient. It does not reinforce a faith based solely on obedience. It introduces cosmic responsibility, the idea that knowing too much can generate irreversible consequences, that not every revelation is liberating, that silence at times is part of preserving order. When it was set aside, the book did not vanish completely. It survived on the margins, in specific traditions, in manuscripts preserved outside the main axis of religious power, like an echo of something too ancient to be fully integrated. And that may be the most revealing point of all. The Book of Enoch was never entirely forgotten. It was kept at a distance, as if it were always present but never central, available but not encouraged, existing but not proclaimed. In the end, what it leaves behind is not a clear doctrine. It is an unease, the sense that the world may be more structured than it appears, that knowledge is not only light, but weight, that there are invisible boundaries which, once crossed, alter the balance of everything. The Book of Enoch does not ask you to believe. It does not ask you to reject. It simply remains, like a text that suggests reality does not fully reveal itself, that some truths require time, others silence, and perhaps the most dangerous ones of all require that they not be spoken aloud. Everything else, as always, is what was allowed to remain visible.